Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Today I'm going to answer a question for you sent in by Jorg. And it's a simple one about footwear, so it should be fairly straightforward to chat through. But truth is, it's a question I get fairly often. So it's worth exploring a little bit. And this is, as I say, from Jorg, who says, Ash, I've been interested in high quality footwear for some time now, but so far I've always stayed clear of leather-soled shoes. Many shoes, particularly Oxfords and loafers, often come with leather soles because, as a shoe shop assistant once explained to me, leather soles are more elegant than thicker and more robust and more durable rubber soles. I live in a city environment in northwest Germany where it rains rather often. Do you think it would be advisable for me to invest in a pair of leather-soled shoes for daily use? Thanks for your advice. Well, it's an excellent question, and actually living in the United Kingdom, I share a similar, often damp climate with you. Now, when I say that, there's quite a lot of the year where it isn't damp, so there is a lot to be gleaned from both types of shoes. But let me give you a little bit of market knowledge. So, according to a market report, right, the global footwear sole material market is said to be, lists leather accounts for 57.6% of the sole material share in 2025. Isn't the internet amazing? I can actually tell you, right, that most shoes, nearly 60% of shoes sold in this year were leather soled, opposed to rubber. I don't know how that helps us today, because I'm going to just give you my thoughts. I will admit to you, Jorg, that in my own journey of sartorial elegance, I have always thought that leather soles are without doubt the most elegant. They're the sleekest. They've also, in a way, always, when I was a young chap growing up in a very impoverished circumstances, right, I always had rubber-soled shoes. And I always, when I saw a gentleman wearing leather soles, I thought to myself, there's somebody who's kind of made it, because leather soles also imply that the shoes are Goodyear welted. They may be Blake stitched as well, but for the most part here in the UK, a leather-soled shoe would suggest it's a Goodyear welted shoe, opposed to a shoe which is cemented, which, your leather-soled shoe for me is kind of a sign of wealth, success, interesting clothing. So there's all sorts of things which play into it. Now, there are reasons for and against leather-soled shoes. Let's talk about the four, shall we? So I would say, at the very top of the tree is elegance and tradition. A well-made leather shoe, I think, is the hallmark of classic men's footwear. And, the shoes that you will have seen, the Hollywood icons that we venerate today, the Cary Grants and the David Nivens and so on, it was leather-soled shoes they were wearing around. They weren't wearing city soles or commando soles. It was the sleek, elegant leather sole, regardless of the climate that you found yourself in. They are quite refined, they are elegant, they are slimmer profile, they tend to come on the better shoes. So they definitely play into that elegance and tradition. No doubt about it. I'm pretty sure, right, that as the sort of top of the sartorial hierarchy in my country, the king himself, I very much doubt he wears many rubber-soled shoes. I imagine it is mostly leather-soled shoes for the boss, and because he is the archetypical symbol of elegance when it comes to gentlemen's clothing. The other thing that leather shoes provide for us, to a degree, there is an element of breathability, and there is an element of comfort over time as well. Breathability, obviously leather is, it's a permeable substance. It will allow air to pass through it. Not very well, I will admit that. It's not like it's allowing your foot to breathe easily, but certainly, opposed to a rubber-soled shoe, which can, and I have known it myself, the rubber obviously provides an almost watertight and airtight seal around your foot. It can cause your foot to be, it can draw your foot. It can make you sweat more perspiration on the foot, which can have its own issues with malodorous footwear. So there are elements to it both. And comfort, well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's more comfortable, but certainly better quality shoes tend to be leather sole shoes, which will come with things like a cork bed within the makeup of the shoe, which will over time obviously take on the lay of your foot and be more comfortable. I mean, I will tell you, I've got a number of very high quality leather shoes in my, let's not talk about the size of my shoe collection. I don't even admit it to myself these days. But there are certainly shoe brands within there, Crockett & Jones, Cheney, Trickers and so on. Leather soles, and they are as comfortable as the slippers that I wear around the house in the evening. Because over time, those shoes, they become like butter to your feet. Your feet slide in and the comfort level is off the scale, which I don't honestly get with my rubber sole shoes. Just putting it out there. And the final area that I think leather has in its favour, again more to do with the fact that leather sole shoes tend to be Goodyear welted, is easy repairability. Absolutely. I mean, you can of course send your shoe back to the factory if you want it to be repaired. I recently sent a pair of my Loke shoes back to the Loke factory for a factory refurbishment. About 2 years ago I sent a pair of my Cheney shoes back for a refurbishment, and they came back like a new pair of shoes or boots. They were superb. That's something you're not generally going to be so inclined to do with a rubber sole, because simply, typically, you haven't put that sort of money into the shoe. You're not so interested in the sustainability. But certainly when it comes to leather soles, you know, a competent cobbler or a factory refurbishment program means that you can extend the lifespan of those leather sole shoes quite literally for as long as your life, with the skills that the cobblers will have. So those are the positives. You could have guessed them. The negatives is what you have to weigh up against it, isn't it? Now for me, the biggest negative is poor wet weather performance. Living in a country which often has wet, and this morning I woke up, the streets they had a glisten of frost upon them. And if I'd gone walking around in my leather sole shoes, because leather, sheer underneath, no grip, very little traction, all right? If you catch, you know, a sheer surface with your leather sole shoe, before you know it, you can be on your arse in the street. You could hurt yourself, let alone hurt your sense of ego. So there is that downside to it, and that, I think, for me, is the biggest negativity. Aside from the fact that poor wet weather performance also expands into the deleterious effect that constant exposure to the wet will have on leather. It will deteriorate it, it will cause it to have a shorter lifespan without a doubt. If you're constantly getting it wet, drying it out, getting it wet, drying it out, it's certainly going to affect that as well as your safety, which is the more important. But, you know, if worn frequently in wet conditions, you become something of an ice skater with your leather sole shoes. The other thing with leather soles, opposed to rubber, is reduced durability when it comes to walking around. Because if you're living in a city, as you say you were, I dare say you spend most of your time walking on pavement, and rubber sole shoes, in my experience, will typically last twice as long as a leather sole shoe. Now, I've got a number of shoes which are day-night soles, you know, this composite rubber, which is quite low profile. It's a good compromise, actually. We'll talk about that in a moment. But they last twice as long as my leather sole shoes. Now, I love my leather because it's stylish and it's elegant, but it certainly doesn't last as long. And it's an expensive business sending them back to the factory for refurbishment. Typically, it's about 130 to 150 pounds, which if you're doing that every 3 or 4 years, maybe every 5 years, depending how often and how hard you wear your shoes, it can mount up. So even a pair of quite expensive shoes can have an ongoing cost over time. And there's a higher maintenance involvement as well, I think, with leather soles, because the heels will wear down. I took a pair of my wife's boots. She has leather sole boots. I took them into the cobblers the other day to have a new heel put on them. You know, so you can have metal inserts into the heels at the toe plate. these things generally aren't an issue on your rubber sole shoes, because the rubber just absorbs that movement on the pavement, the abrasing on the pavement, whereas leather, it does definitely cost a lot more to keep going. You might start applying substances to keep the I think there's something called Sole Guard you can buy by Saphir, which will, prevent the water getting through your sole. All of these things you don't have to worry about with a rubber sole shoe. It's just part and parcel of having rubber soles. It's a matter of weighing it up, isn't it? Okay, so what's my final advice then? It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I love leather sole shoes. I think there is nothing which replicates that on a man's foot. And when I go to London, I was in London the other day, I was wearing a pair of my, a leather sole pair of Trickers, brand new pair of shoes actually. Wrong thing to wear because it rained halfway through the afternoon and it did turn into a bit of an ice sort of skating situation. But the elegance, the style, the sharp lines, and that little glance of the leather when you sit down, and it speaks volumes about the sort of person you are and the interest that you have in your shoes. When you look at the very high-end shoe manufacturers, Gaziano and Girling and so on, their rubber-soled output is a tiny proportion of their portfolio of shoes because they're interested in the elegance and the art form of shoemaking. But then, of course, at the same time, we're chasing that practicality, that durability, that comfort, and that safety. So there is a middle ground. I talked about the day-night sole. That's a good path to go. I do have a lot of day-night soled shoes and boots because that affords you, to a degree, the sleek elegance, which we get with a leather soled shoe. Often on Goodyear welted as well, so they are repairable. But they give you just enough grip and traction so that they look, they do look good, but they also give you that safety feature when you're walking around. So you got a bit of both. You got a bit of both there. Another alternative, and it's one that I don't favour, I'll say that up front, and I know I always wind people up when I say this, I don't like putting rubber oversoles, so these toppy soles, on top of an existing leather sole. Many people will say, I buy a leather sole shoe, I take it to the cobbler, and I have the cobbler put a rubber outer sole over it. For me, that is like buying a piece of fine art and painting over it in another colour, right? If you're buying a leather sole shoe, wear it as a leather sole shoe. If you want a rubber soled shoe, buy a rubber soled shoe. But try not to marry the both together because it doesn't look good, in my opinion, right? Just me speaking here. When I see a guy who has done that, I always think to myself, is this somebody who's just affected a crude attempt at repairing a pair of shoes? Or, it just doesn't work for me personally. I would rather have, right, and if this is a luxury that you can afford, shoes that I wear on wet days and shoes which I wear on dry days. That's how I make do with my sort of shoe wearing situation. I wear my leather soles for my sharpest, sleekest, most important dressing situations, and my rubber sole shoes where I know I'm going to be walking all day, or where I am not really that worried about the appearance that I cut when I'm in a social environment or something of that nature. And of course, many of the brands now have things like city soles, day-night soles. There's a lot of option. It is still effectively rubber or leather, but it gives you more choices to make. I hope it's been of some use to you, Jorg. Ultimately, it depends on you and what you put the highest value in. Elegance or practicality, or, like me, both. And you balance them up depending on the situation that you're going into. I fear I haven't really answered your question, but if nothing else, I've given you my thoughts upon it. If you've got a question for me, drop it into the comment section or even send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'll try and make a video to answer your question if I can. And don't forget, you can join me on this journey as well by becoming a patron. In the description box below this video, you'll find a link to my Patreon pages where you can actually join that for free. But some of the tiers are free, some of them you have to pay for, but all of them benefit from the additional videos which I make, especially for my patrons. So until the next time we meet, whether it be leather or rubber soles, put your best foot forward. Take care.